Once, when I was a student minister, I was filling in somewhere. Not going to say where. I was filling in somewhere, and I honestly don't even remember what the scripture reading was that I was talking about that day, but I do remember that somewhere in that message, I suggested that the writers of the Gospels make it seem as though the disciples, the chosen 12 of Jesus, are not very smart. It certainly seems like they often don't get it. And anyway, after that service, somebody came up to me and they said, "So you're saying the disciples are stupid?" So let me just say that one of the things you'll learn as a student minister very quickly is not to say anything when people challenge you about stuff, because you're just a student, right? So, and I had not learned this yet. And I said, I'm not suggesting they're stupid. I'm just pointing out that the authors, the people who are telling the story, certainly seem to imply that they're not very smart, and that they often don't get things. Jesus has to explain them. And in the back of my head, I was thinking to myself, that's also the reason why we have ministers, isn't it? Because you don't get it either. And I didn't say that part. Because none of that's true, really, is it? I mean, there are certainly times when the authors of the Gospels tell a story where it seems like Jesus has to repeat stuff and really like hammer it home with the disciples because they maybe don't get it right away. But of course, that's a storytelling technique for you and me. It's not meant to imply that the person in that moment isn't smart enough to get it. I actually think the disciples got it pretty quick. It's meant so that we'll get it eventually. And more often than not, that point that we're supposed to get doesn't have anything to do with somebody going into some lengthy theological explanation of it for you. You might need some context and things, but usually the point's pretty clear. Here's a story that actually ends with Jesus saying, "Do you get it?" And the disciples going, "Yes, we do." How often do you run across one of those? What do they get is the question. What did you get from that story? I'll tell you what I got from that story. The kingdom of heaven is like lots of things. I can give you a whole pile of different metaphors for the kingdom of heaven. This is what it's like. I'm sure you could come up with your own, right? Jesus has several here, and they're about how essentially what he's saying is that again, I'm not going to Bible study these, but he's essentially saying, it could be a little thing that grows into something big. It's constantly expanding. It's something that we would desire so much that we would seek it with all that we have. There's of course that little judgment piece at the end, which everyone always loves. I'm not interested in that piece of this. What I'm interested in is what all of those stories have in common, which is absolutely none of those moments where Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like this, does he say exactly what it looks like. They're all action metaphors. This is how the kingdom comes. It's like a mustard seed, which is really tiny, like it's a little thing, but then it grows into a giant thing in which people want to be part of it. It's like yeast, again, tiny little thing that causes something else to expand, causes something else to turn more into more of what it really is. They're all action metaphors. None of them say what it looks like. So here's one of those moments where in my head, realizing that the disciples are very smart, in my head, I can't believe there wasn't an exchange after this story where one of the disciples went, yes, we get how it comes and how it works. Can you tell us a little bit about what it looks like? And then I realized there's a reason why there isn't that little piece in the story. It's because that would have been a moment in which Jesus would have gone, ugh. Because Jesus' life is what the kingdom of heaven looks like. All that stuff we talk about Jesus teaching as the example of Jesus, the life of Jesus, all that love Jesus is trying to live into the world, all of those things Jesus is trying to teach us by simply being are what the kingdom of heaven looks like here. I cannot tell you what the kingdom of heaven looks like somewhere else. I'd like to say I'll report back when I get there, but that's not really how that works. But when Jesus talks about the kingdom of heaven being here, which he says quite clearly in the Gospel of Luke, or near, which is what Matthew has him say, I honestly think what Jesus is essentially trying to say is it's right here. Do you not see it? It's in, I'm living it for you, right? Like, look. So when the disciples emphatically go, yes, we get that. That's how it works. I'm sure after it, one of them went, and thank you so much for showing it to us every day. The tricky part is, I think, more often than not, it's not just a question of how we live in order to make it happen. It's how we don't live in order to make it happen because we don't see it happening around us. And the thing is, it is constantly happening around us. If we just take a moment to realize it, to envision it. If you have not seen the film Field of Dreams or read the story Shoeless Joe by W.P. Kinsella, shame on you. You should have seen that. And by the way, that's W.P. Kinsella's Canadian author. Why have you not read that story? Okay, it's a really American story, but nonetheless. It's essentially the story of a man, Ray, who is a corn farmer in Iowa, who hears a voice tell him, if you build it, he will come, which causes him to plow part of his cornfield under and make a baseball diamond. You have to read the story or see the movie. And what happens is that the ghosts, let's say, of baseball players from the late teens and early 20s appear and start playing baseball on his diamond. One of which is Shoeless Joe Jackson, famous baseball player. Towards the end of the movie, and of course he does all this not realizing what it's for, but towards the end of the movie, Shoeless Joe says to him, if you build it, he will come. And points to the catcher, and it's his dad. Ray never had a relationship with his father. It was just not part of his life until much later in life. And so the point of doing all of this was so that he would meet his dad. And they meet, and here's a little bit of the conversation that they have.
You catch a good game.
Thank you. It's so beautiful here. For me, it's like a dream come true. Can I ask you something? Is this heaven?
It's Iowa.
Iowa? Could have sworn it was heaven.
Is there a heaven?
Oh, yeah. It's the place dreams come true.
Maybe this is heaven.
Good night, Ray.
Good night, John.
I've never been to Iowa. I don't need to go to Iowa to understand the point of that. You see that bit where he looks around and he sees his family and he sees his home. He sees his farm. He sees the baseball diamond that he built so that he could meet his dad. In a minute, they're going to play catch. Something he never got to do. None of that was just easy, that happened with no, like, farming, you know, farming's not easy all the time. It's a lot of work. In fact, in the story, he's about to lose the farm when he decides to plow under a significant piece of his crop. It's hard work, and he's had challenges. His life has been a challenge. But he sees the love of his family, and he sees the home he built. He sees the land. He's finally had a moment to have some kind of a relationship with his father. All of those things didn't just miraculously happen. There was hard work, there was challenges. But here he is realizing he has heaven right here. I think that's the point. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, isn't asking for God to do something to make that happen. It isn't saying, well, maybe we can get to that at some point. It's an affirmation of what is. The kingdom, whatever language you want to use for that, and I'm not a big fan of the word kingdom. There are other ways to say that. I like community of God is here. The will of God isn't about a divine plan or about God getting God's way. It's about what God is, which is love and grace, compassion, all of those things we talk about, all of the stories we tell about those things. That's what that is. That's the kingdom of heaven. That's the community of God, the family of God. Oh, all that other language that we use too to describe the children of God, our relationship with creation, all our relations. It's already here. We have a part in participating in making it happen. That's why we learn the stories of Jesus and the people who are being Jesus. It's love and grace and compassion that are the energy, the life-giving energy, the creative energy of the world in which we live right now. It's not about something we're going to find eventually, or that we hope we're going to find eventually. Yes, you are. Spoiler. That other place is really the perfection of all of these things, isn't it? Isn't that what it's supposed to be? Here, part of our life, what gives life to us and to this creation, is to live that here. To create the community of God, the community of love here. You can see it all around you if you look. In fact, when you see it all around you, let that inspire you to create more. It's hard work, and it doesn't always go the way you want it to. There's lots of challenges. Interestingly enough, Jesus never criticizes anybody when they fail at it. Nor does Jesus have the expectation that you'll be perfect at it. Neither does God, I don't think, because God knows us for who we truly are. And who we truly are is that very love, that divine spirit that inspires life and creativity. We are good. It's hard work. It is. But look around you and see the stories. Be one of those stories. And we can change the world. We can make the world more of the kingdom of God it already is.